My name is Madison Parker, and I just turned 22. Last month, my grandfather Richard, whom I had respected and loved my entire life, gave me the most unexpected, and perhaps greatest, birthday gift of my life. Parker Innovations, the $120 million tech company he had painstakingly built. It should have been the happiest day of my life. But like a sudden storm, everything quickly turned into a nightmare when my mother, Catherine, and her newlywed husband, Robert, tried every possible way to seize everything. I never for a moment thought my own mother could betray me, especially after everything grandfather had done for both of us. Yet, she put me in an unbelievable situation. Either give up my inheritance or lose the home I had cherished for so many years. In that tense moment, amidst my anxiety and anger, grandfather softly chuckled. A low, raspy laugh, but one that carried a strange resolve, causing Robert, the triumphant one, to falter, a fleeting confusion evident on his face. To understand why Grandfather Richard chose me as his heir, you need to know a little about my family history. I grew up primarily with my grandfather. My father, his only son, died in a car accident when I was just 10 years old. My mother, Catherine, was initially devastated. But just a year later, she seemed more concerned with her social life than with raising a child who was growing up and still grieving the loss of her father. Your mother probably deals with pain differently. Grandfather would often explain whenever I cried after an important school event that Catherine missed. He never spoke ill of my mother, but his eyes always held a deep disappointment. Richard Parker was a legend in the tech industry. He started Parker Innovations in our family garage in the early 80s, with only sheer determination and a genius mind. By the time I was born, the company was worth millions. And by my high school graduation, it had expanded internationally, with an estimated value of over $100 million. Despite such success, my grandfather always maintained his humility and strong work ethic. Money doesn't define character, Maddie, he often told me. Actions are the true measure. After my father passed away, I often spent weekends and most summer holidays at my grandfather's estate. While other kids my age hung out at the mall or at pool parties, I'd trail after Grandfather Richard through the halls of Parker Innovations, silently absorbing every bit of business knowledge like a sponge. At 16, I started helping with basic market research. By 18, I was sitting in on product development meetings. The employees at the company had watched me grow up, and many of them had become like family. I studied business administration with a minor in computer science at Stanford, and every summer I returned to work at the company. Grandfather never pressured me to join the family business, but his face always lit up with pride whenever I expressed interest in it. "You have your father's head and my stubbornness," he often said. "That's a powerful combination." Meanwhile, my mother, Catherine, moved from one relationship to another, with increasingly questionable men. Catherine was a beautiful and charming woman when she wanted to be, but her taste in men was seriously flawed. After my father, she seemed drawn to men who were his complete opposite. Flashy, irresponsible, and often opportunistic. Then Robert Blackwell appeared. He entered our lives 6 months ago when my mother brought him to a family dinner. Robert was unlike any of her previous men. He was a former sales manager at Techsphere, one of our competitors. He was suave, articulate, and completely charmed my mother. What Catherine didn't realize, but grandfather and I saw immediately, was the calculating glint in his eyes as he surveyed our home, asked loaded questions about the company, and seemed more interested in grandfather's business connections than in building a relationship with us. "I don't trust that man," grandfather told me privately after dinner. "He's not here for Catherine." But my mother was completely infatuated with him. Within 3 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony that Robert somehow convinced Catherine to pay for entirely. I stood by her as maid of honor, trying to force a smile while Robert's eyes continually scanned the wealthy guests grandfather had invited. After the wedding, Robert quit his job, claiming he wanted to focus on building a family. He started showing up at company events uninvited, introducing himself as part of the Parker family and the business. Employees would often call me, confused, after he requested confidential reports or tried to insert himself into strategic meetings. Around this time, grandfather's health began to decline. He never fully recovered from his heart attack 2 years prior. and the stress of watching Robert hover around his life's legacy, like a vulture, made things worse. I started taking on more responsibilities at the company, learning everything I could from grandfather while we still had time together. "I'm not worried about the company, Maddie," he told me one evening as we reviewed quarterly reports in his home office. "I'm worried about you and your mother when I'm gone." I reassured him that I could take care of myself, but we both knew Catherine was highly susceptible to manipulation, especially by men like Robert, who seemed to have an uncanny ability to identify and exploit her insecurities. What I didn't know then was that grandfather had been quietly preparing a plan that would force all of us to reveal our true colors. My 22nd birthday fell on a perfect September Saturday. Grandfather had insisted on a small gathering at his estate, though his definition of small included about 50 guests. The sprawling gardens were adorned with twinkling lights, and a jazz band played near the pool. The guest list included family members, close friends, and several key executives from Parker Innovations. Catherine and Robert arrived later than expected, my mother resplendent in a designer dress that probably cost more than many people's monthly income. Robert wore a tailored suit and his familiar practiced smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. "Happy birthday, darling." Catherine kissed my cheek lightly. "Doesn't she look lovely, dear?" Robert nodded, his gaze already sweeping the crowd for important business connections. "Very lovely. Is that Walter Chin from Tech Venture Capital?" I bit back a retort about his priorities and instead thanked them for coming. Throughout the evening, I noticed Robert cornering executives in conversations that left them looking increasingly uncomfortable. My cousin, Natalie, pulled me aside after escaping one such chat. "Uncle just asked me what I thought Richard was worth," she whispered. "Who asks that?" Around 9 p.m., grandfather drew everyone's attention by tapping his glass. The crowd quieted as he moved to the center of the patio, leaning slightly on his cane. Though his health wasn't what it used to be, his voice was still strong and commanding. "First, let's all wish my beautiful granddaughter a very happy birthday," he began, leading everyone in a chorus of happy birthday. I blushed, standing next to him as everyone clapped and cheered. "Madison has been the light of my life since the day she was born," grandfather continued after the applause died down. "After we lost my son, her father, she became even more precious to me." His voice caught slightly, and I squeezed his hand. "Today, I want to make an announcement," he said, straightening his back. "After 50 years at the helm of Parker Innovations, I've decided it's time for me to retire." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was news to everyone, even me. I looked at him in surprise, but he just winked at me. A company needs youth, fresh ideas, and unshakable integrity to thrive in today's market. I've been fortunate enough to watch Madison grow into a brilliant, hardworking young woman who understands not just the business, but the heart and soul of Parker Innovations. My heart began to pound as I realized what was coming. Across the garden, I saw Robert suddenly pay close attention, abandoning his conversation. "Therefore, on Madison's birthday, I am transferring the ownership and majority control of Parker Innovations to her, effective immediately." Gasps and exclamations of surprise echoed around us. I stood frozen in shock as grandfather beamed at me. Executives who had known me since I was a child began to applaud, and soon most of the guests followed suit. My cousins exchanged looks of mingled surprise and envy, but my attention was riveted on my mother and Robert. Catherine's smile was strained, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, anger, confusion. Robert didn't even try to hide his reaction. His face flushed, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitch in his cheek. "Richard, this is quite a surprise," Catherine said, her voice attempting lightness as she approached us. "Shouldn't we discuss such important family matters privately?" Grandfather's smile didn't waver. "There's nothing to discuss, Catherine. The paperwork is done. My lawyer is here with all the documentation." Walter Freeman, grandfather's lawyer for over 30 years, stepped forward with a leather briefcase. "Everything is ready, Richard. We just need Madison's signature to finalize the transfer." The next hour passed in a haze. I signed document after document, my hand trembling slightly as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. A $120 million company was now my responsibility. Executives came up to congratulate me, many of them with genuine warmth. Your father would be so proud, Susan Chun, our CTO, whispered as she hugged me. Through it all, I caught glimpses of Robert whispering angrily to my mother, her practiced smile cracking with each passing minute. I knew they wouldn't let this go, but in that moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight and wonder of the extraordinary gift my grandfather had bestowed. As the party continued, Grandfather led me to a quiet corner of the garden. Are you mad at me for not telling you? He asked, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. More shocked, I admitted. Grandfather, are you sure about this? It's your life's work. He squeezed my hand. Maddie, I've been preparing you for this your whole life. You understand what Parker Innovations stands for. It's not just about profit, it's about innovations that improve lives. I trust you to continue that more than anyone in the world. His trust in me brought tears to my eyes. I won't let you down, I promised. I know you won't, he said, then glanced over my shoulder towards Robert, who was at the bar on his third scotch. And don't worry about the vultures. I've been dealing with their kind my whole life. That cryptic remark should have been my first clue that Grandfather had anticipated everything that was about to unfold. The last guests departed around midnight, leaving only family in Grandfather's sprawling home. I was helping the staff clear up in the kitchen when Catherine stopped me, Robert looming behind her like a thundercloud. We need to talk, she said, her voice sharp. I followed them into the study. The feeling that a confrontation had been brewing all evening was about to explode. Grandfather had retired to his room earlier, saying he was tired after a long day. Robert slammed the study door shut behind us. The warm, book-filled room, usually a peaceful sanctuary, suddenly felt suffocating. What the hell was that? Catherine snapped, pacing in front of Grandfather's desk. Grandfather's retirement gift, I suppose? I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm as surprised as you are. This is completely irresponsible, Robert interjected, his usual feigned politeness gone, replaced by a harder edge. She barely graduated college. How can she run a company of this size? I straightened my shoulders. I've been working at Parker Innovations since I was 16. I know this company inside and out. Catherine waved a dismissive hand. Summer jobs while still in school hardly compare to running an entire corporation. Which is why, Robert said, stepping closer, we've decided that I'll be taking over as interim CEO while you apprentice. His audacity stunned me for a moment. Excuse me. It makes perfect sense, Catherine continued, as if they had rehearsed this. Robert has management experience. He'll handle the day-to-day operations while you finish your studies. Absolutely not, I stated firmly. Grandfather transferred ownership and the CEO title to me. The papers are signed. It's done. Robert's veneer of reason completely vanished. Listen here, you spoiled little princess, he snarled. This company needs experienced leadership, not some little girl playing businesswoman because her grandfather felt sorry for her. Robert, Catherine cried, though she seemed more concerned with his tone than the content. No, Catherine, she needs to hear this, he snapped. Your grandfather is a sentimental old fool, making irrational decisions. The board will never accept you as CEO. They'll laugh you out of the room. My hands trembled with anger, but I forced my voice to remain calm. The board has known me since I was a child. Many of them congratulated me and offered their help. That help will evaporate when they realize you know nothing, he sneered. Be reasonable, Madison. Let me handle the business side. You can keep the title and enjoy the profits. It all clicked then. Robert had planned this from the beginning. Marrying my mother, charming my grandfather, positioning himself to take over the company. He just hadn't anticipated Grandfather bypassing them both and giving everything directly to me. The answer is no, I said firmly. I am the owner and CEO of Parker Innovations. Grandfather chose me, not you. Catherine's face hardened. This isn't just about you, Madison. This is about our family legacy. Robert and I are trying to protect you from making a huge mistake. By stealing my company? I asked in disbelief. It's not stealing when it's family, Robert retorted sharply. But if you insist on making this difficult, here's how it's going to go. Either you accept our help in running the company, or you can pack your bags and leave this house. I stared at my mother, waiting for her to object to this outrageous ultimatum. But she said nothing. You're going to kick me out just because I won't let your husband of 5 minutes take over my inheritance? I asked, my voice slightly choked. Catherine's eyes flashed. This is my home too, Madison. And Robert is my husband. If you can't respect our place in this family, then yes, you should leave. The betrayal cut deep. My own mother had chosen this man over me. Fine, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll go. Don't be so dramatic, Madison, Catherine sighed. Just agree to Robert's offer, and we can move forward as a family. A strange family, I muttered, turning towards the door. As my hand touched the doorknob, a soft chuckle came from just outside the door. All of us spun around. Grandfather stood there, still in his party clothes, leaning on his cane, but his eyes held a fire I hadn't seen in years. Well, he said, his tone deceptively mild. Isn't this an interesting family discussion? Robert's face went pale. Richard, we were just discussing the transition. I heard everything you were discussing, Grandfather cut him off. And I must say, Robert, you showed your hand sooner than I expected. You're not a patient man, are you? He stepped into the room, his gaze shifting to my mother. Catherine, I'm disappointed, though not surprised. Dad, please. Catherine began, but Grandfather held up a hand. Madison, he said, turning to me. Go pack a bag. Not because you're being kicked out, but because you'll be staying in my guest house tonight. Tomorrow we initiate Plan B. Plan B, Robert repeated, looking genuinely concerned for the first time. Grandfather's smile was cold. Did you really think I'd hand over my life's work to the likes of you without contingencies, Robert? I've been in business longer than you've been alive. You've made a grave miscalculation. As I left the room, I heard Grandfather softly tell them both. By morning, you'll understand just how grave that miscalculation was. I walked out with tears streaming down my face, but with Grandfather's steady presence behind me, I also felt something else. The first stirrings of righteous anger, which would carry me through what was to come. The guest house on Grandfather's property was larger than most people's main homes, but that night it felt empty and cold despite its luxurious furnishings. I barely slept, replaying the confrontation in my mind. By morning, the sadness had hardened into resolve. My mother had made her choice. Now it was my turn. Grandfather arrived at 8 a.m., carrying a thick file and wearing what his staff called his battle suit. His sharpest, most impeccably tailored suit, reserved only for critical negotiations. Sleep well? He asked, knowing full well I hadn't. Not really, I admitted, pouring us both coffee. Good, he nodded, to my surprise. Anger and indignation are better fuel than complacency. You'll need that fire today. Over breakfast, Grandfather outlined what had been happening in the 3 weeks since Robert and my mother returned from their honeymoon. Robert had systematically met with board members, implying Grandfather's health was affecting his judgment. He had contacted key clients, introducing himself as the future of Parker's leadership. He had even started approaching a potential buyer for the company, a large tech conglomerate known for acquiring and dismantling companies they bought. How did you know all this? I asked, astonished. Grandfather's eyes twinkled. Because I had him investigated the day after he proposed to your mother. He slid several photos across the table. Robert meeting with executives from our competitor, DG Future. Robert looking very cozy with a woman who wasn't my mother. Robert shaking hands with Jeffrey Collins, a CEO notorious for hostile takeovers. Robert Blackwell isn't even his real name, Grandfather continued. His real name is Robert Schwartz. He's changed his identity twice. His specialty is marrying wealthy women, gaining control of their assets, and then disappearing with as much cash as possible. The revelation stunned me. Does Mom know? Grandfather's expression softened. Your mother always sees what she wants to see. She always has, he explained. We need to move quickly. Despite the ownership transfer being legally done, Robert had already started acting. By midday, I was finding out just how aggressive those actions were. When I arrived at Parker Innovations headquarters, my key card was rejected. The security guard, new and unfamiliar with me, wouldn't let me in without authorization. I called Susan Chin, our CTO, who came down to escort me, looking flustered and worried. There was a memo, she explained as we rode the elevator to the executive floor, from Robert Blackwell, claiming to be interim CEO by family decision. It said all executive decisions needed his approval pending board review of the transition. My hands clenched into fists. He has no authority here. Most of us know that, Susan said cautiously, but he has Catherine's backing, and he's been very convincing with some of the newer board members. The situation was worse than I thought. Robert had taken over my father's old office, which should have been mine, sitting there as if he belonged. When I confronted him, he gave me his familiar fake smile. "Madison, good of you to come. We need to discuss your role in this transition." "Get out of my office," I stated. His smile hardened. "Your mother and I have spoken to several board members. They're concerned about your experience. Until those concerns are addressed, I'll be overseeing operations." "That's not your decision." "We'll let the board decide at the emergency meeting I've called for tomorrow," he replied smoothly. "In the meantime, why don't you shadow a few department heads, learn the ropes properly?" I was being treated like an intern in my own company. When I tried to access the executive computer systems, I found my login credentials had been restricted. By mid-afternoon, an email went out to all staff, stating that during the leadership transition, all departmental decisions required Robert's approval within 3 days. Board Chairman William Taylor, who had known grandfather for over 30 years, adjusted his glasses as he read. So, effectively, Robert had no real authority to make any of the changes he proposed? "Absolutely none," grandfather confirmed. "Madison owns 70% of this company. I retain 25%. The remaining 5% is publicly held. Robert owns precisely 0%. Robert's facade completely crumbled. "You devious old man. You set this up from the beginning." "I protected my company and my granddaughter," grandfather replied calmly. "Which is what any responsible business owner would do." The meeting dissolved into chaos as Robert continued to shout accusations while board members murmured in astonishment. My mother sat frozen, staring at the evidence of Robert's deception. William Taylor finally called for silence. "I believe we've heard enough. This emergency meeting was called to address leadership concerns, and I think those concerns have been thoroughly clarified." He looked around the table. "Unless there are objections, I move that we officially recognize Madison Parker as the CEO of Parker Innovations, effective immediately, with Richard Parker serving in an advisory capacity as stipulated in their agreement." The vote was unanimous, even Robert's recent allies abandoning him. As the meeting adjourned, Robert stormed towards the door, only pausing to snarl at me. "This isn't over. I'm still your mother's husband. I still have leverage." Grandfather heard him and stepped between us. "Actually, Robert, your belongings have already been removed from Catherine's house. The locks have been changed, and divorce papers are being drawn up. You might want to check your bank accounts too. Any transfers you made from Parker funds have been frozen pending investigation." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in Robert's eyes. He looked towards my mother, but she turned away, tears streaming down her face. "Security will escort you out," I said, gesturing to the security personnel waiting outside the boardroom. "Don't bother collecting your office items. They've been packed and will be sent to your lawyer." As Robert was led away, still protesting, I turned to face the board members and executives who were looking on with varying degrees of shock and admiration. "I want to thank you all for your support," I said, surprised my voice was so steady. "I know many of you have concerns about my experience, and that's perfectly valid. I have a lot to learn. But I grew up in this company. I understand its values and its vision, and I promise to work harder than anyone to honor my grandfather's legacy while leading Parker Innovations into the future." One by one, they came up to shake my hand or offer words of encouragement. Susan Chin gave me a tight hug. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. When the boardroom had emptied, leaving just me, grandfather, and my mother, who looked utterly defeated. "I'm so sorry, Madison," she sobbed. I never imagined he would." I wanted to be angry, to make her feel the sting of betrayal, but looking at her then, I saw what grandfather had tried to tell me. She wasn't evil, just a weak woman. manipulated by a master con artist. We'll talk later, Mom, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology. I think you need time to process things. She nodded tearfully and left, escorted home by Grandfather's assistant. You handled that well, Grandfather said when it was just the two of us. Both Robert and your mother. I collapsed into a chair, suddenly exhausted. I still can't believe we did it. Grandfather sat next to me. This is just the beginning, Madison. Running this company will mean facing challenges like this regularly, though hopefully not always from family members. I looked out at the city skyline, the enormity of my new reality slowly sinking in. I'm scared, Grandfather. He took my hand, his grip still strong despite his age. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But remember what you did today. Remember how you stood up for yourself and for this company. That's why I chose you. Not because you're my granddaughter, but because you have the mettle to do what needs to be done. For the first time in days, I smiled, a genuine smile, not a forced one.